Havana.
Yeah, cool.
Hello everyone and welcome to Flight Club. My name is Klaus Leopold and I'm the co-host of this show. An exciting guest, but first over to you, Cliff. You are the second host.
Indeed. Good evening and welcome everyone. Very excited to have you with us this evening. Yes, so as Klaus says, we have Matías Fernández joining us. He is an Agile coach at Swisscom. Matías, would you like to say hi to everyone very quickly?
Hello world, I'm Matías. As Cliff said, Agile coach at Swisscom here in Switzerland. I'm looking forward to be talking to you tonight.
Cool. Very excited to have you here with us this evening, Matías. And just want to do a couple of quick shout outs. I see lots of friendly faces and wonderful names that we recognize on the live stream. I notice Håkan Force is there specifically. I was laughing at your May the Force be with you. Always a classic. Yeah. So lots of people. I see people joining. There's Swiss folks. Siggy is joining as well. Where do we have people from all over the world? I'm seeing languages. It's fantastic. Cool. So welcome to everybody. Just before we kick off, I want to remind everybody, if you enjoy the content that we're putting out, please hit subscribe and like on the video. It really does help us to kind of get the word out there. And as I've mentioned a couple of times before, there's a lot of cool YouTube features that unlock when we hit further subscriber numbers and so on. So please do that. We will be telling you about all kinds of interesting things later on in the show. So stick around to the end and there will be some surprises for you. Yes. Last thing I say before we get to the discussion is, of course, if this is the first time you're joining us, I should probably make a joke like if it's the first time you're here, you have to fight, or I guess it's maybe you have to ask a question, something like this. But the idea is basically ask questions in the chat, give us a shout. We will try to weave them into the conversation as we go. It makes it more interesting for everybody if we have this as we go. Cool. I see. Wow. Santiago, Chile, Cleveland, Ohio, Frankfurt, Stuttgart. Wow.
Yeah, cool.
Brazil, all over. This is really fantastic. Really cool that you guys can all join us this evening.
Santiago is actually my place of birth, so I'm very happy to see people. Hola, Santiago.
Nice.
Very cool. It's like a little trip down memory lane. I like it. Cool. So the topic for this evening is safe versus flight levels with a question mark. And what we want to discuss a little bit is we want to explore a little bit about flight levels and safe and this world where they somehow have to coexist. What do they have in common? What's the difference between them? And how do they work together? Or maybe they're in competition with each other. Who knows? We will find out. So yes,
Definitely.
but I think before we get into too much kind of about the topic, I wonder, a lot of this is kind of, for me, maybe the hint is in the name. If we talk about safe, it's scaled agile framework. So this word scale or scaling, this is something that I find really quite interesting. So maybe we should talk a little about what is scaling, what is it about, why is it important? So what are your thoughts, Matías?
Yeah, I think scaling is about involving lots of people into getting things done. So, for example, we at Swisscom, the company in Switzerland, has roughly 17,500 people working for Swisscom at Swisscom. And in the product development, in the technical part, we are a couple of thousand people who work together on delighting customers in the connected world. And I mean, many people, when they start with agile ways of collaborating, and they start within a team, and that's the context where they learn the principles. And if we want to find the solution for large, complex companies, we have to think about, okay, how can we scale what worked within a team to an organization with a couple of hundred or even thousand of people? And I think that's what is meant when we talk about scaling agile or scaling whatever.
Yeah.
So I think generally we're implying, go for it, Klaus.
I think that there are different ways. What I actually see in reality, how you can approach the scenario of scaling. So one thing that I see actually quite often is multiplying. So we have like a method, I don't know, like Scrum or Kanban in our organization, and it's working fine in 2 teams. Unfortunately, we have 400 teams, so we need to install Scrum for 398 teams, and then we are agile. I think this has nothing to do with scaling agile. This is more like multiplying a method into the organization. So I think it's really a lot about establishing agile interactions. We need to make sure that the right team is working on the right stuff at the right time. And that's a different kind of thing. And I think when we build our visualizations, we need to, so usually you don't start with, what was it, Matías, 17,000 people or something like this? So usually you don't start with 17,000 people like this. You start somewhere, and you already need to set up the visualization so that it tells you, okay, here we have scaling points. Whenever we see in our visualization something like waiting for someone, ready for something, and so on. So this is always trigger like, okay, here we need to involve external people. And that's my sense of scaling. Scaling is not multiplying a method into the organization. It's more about like finding the spots, having all the people on board so that we can deliver value end to the market. And I'm really talking about end to end, like from business or whatever is on the very left side of our value chain to the right side. That would be my take on it.
Totally. I totally agree. And for Swisscom, introducing this concept also involved a change in how we think about product development. And I think this was an extremely important change in that before our journey started a couple of years ago, we were very much doing projects, and projects has some kind of drawbacks. You bring people together for a limited period of time, because that's what the project is, right? It
Exactly.
has a defined start and a defined end, and at the end you have some sort of product. And when the product is finished, then the people from this project team spread all over the company or even the world. They maybe also leave the company. And with that, all the know-how and the experience get lost. And so for us, it also involved this scaling agility, introducing scaled agile framework or SAFe, also involved moving from a project business to a product development business with stable teams that work together over a very long period of time, that gather experience, and don't stop working on a product once it reaches version 1, but then continue to develop it and build upon the experience they have gathered.
Yeah.
Cool. So I think, besides just adding more people to the thing, it also involves other aspects that you might not think about beforehand.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think one of the ways that it's defined is somehow, if you think about it in computer systems, we usually talk about it as, the ability for a system to function or continue to function, keep up with additional users within in its broader context. And usually the implication is somehow that the performance is almost improving or very much staying, or at least very much staying the same. But I think often in organizations, one of the challenges that we find is that as the organization gets bigger, it somehow becomes more complex and perhaps even harder to operate. So 1 or 2 teams is somehow a little bit easier than 100 or 200 teams. And when you're trying to get multiple groups of people to work together, that's, at least this is how kind of maybe I think about some of this. But yeah, usually, at least my assumption is that most people, when they talk about scaling, they're implying that it's a bigger organization. There are more people, there are more teams, more customers, more products, something like this. So I think we're more or less kind of on the same sort of a page here. The second thing that I want to talk about is just to kind of get an idea. So SAFe talks about itself as being a framework. And when we talk about flight levels, we talk about it being a thinking model. What's your take? What's the difference between these two? Is it just kind of words on a page, or does this actually mean something? What's the difference between these two things?
Well, for me, it's really this framework. SAFe is a framework or a collection of practices and principles, and a very comprehensive one at that. So you can spend hours or even days or maybe even weeks reading the documentation of Scaled Agile framework. And some aspects of Scaled Agile framework are like a cooking recipe, in that you can read, okay, I want to start with SAFe. What are the steps I need to take to start? What are the roles I need to have to be able to start? It's a bit like maybe a comparison would be Scrum and Kanban. So in Scrum, you have defined roles, you have defined artifacts, and you follow a certain path before you start. Whereas with flight levels, for me, it's a thinking model. And in my career, knowing about flight levels helped me understand Scaled Agile framework better and helped me improve the working systems once we have put them in place. So I really, personally, I like to look, I always keep saying that, I like to look at SAFe through my flight level lenses to understand the world better.
Yeah, I like that. Klaus, would you want to add something to that?
Yes. What was the question?
Thinking model versus framework.
Sorry, yeah. It's late for me, you know, it was a really long day. Yeah, thinking model. I'm not so happy actually with the term thinking model, although I think it is a thinking model. That's yeah, I think the problem with it. So I think flight level really helps you to figure out where in an organization you need to do what in order to achieve what you want to achieve. So it doesn't come with like, okay, you just have to implement all these things here and then everything will be fine. I think, well, at least I'm not smart enough to come up with a recipe which works for each and every organization on this planet, in each and every industry and everything. So flight levels is more like, okay, let's figure it out. Let's be clear what is the problem that we want to solve. So if we don't have a problem, or it doesn't have to be a problem, if we need to be clear of what we want to achieve. If we are clear what we want to achieve, then flight levels, like thinking in flight levels, can help you to identify the right levers in your organization, so that we are doing the right changes. So it's not about a big change up front. So we need to set up everything like it's somehow printed in this book. It's more like, okay, let's figure it out what makes sense in particular our organization. That's why I would call it the thinking model, although I think it's totally unsexy. Thinking is not sexy. Solutions are sexy. Tell us what to do. Here you have a shitload of money and solve all our problems.
And maybe also one difference I see that the flight levels, it takes more like an evolutionary approach to improving product development or whatever working system. Whereas when you have like this recipe approach, for me, it's like Kaizen in some way and Kaikaku on the other hand. And I wouldn't say that Kaizen is always the way to go.
Exactly.
That's also because why the Japanese came up with this notion of Kaikaku. So sometimes I need it. I think it's also good to really implement radical change, and of course this comes at a cost, because you will introduce lots of insecurity into the system for an amount of time, but this maybe, or what I'm trying to say, at Swisscom, by doing this, introducing this radical change, this also opened an opportunity for new people to come into new roles and take on more responsibility, whereas in a traditional organization, you maybe have to have your connections, you have to build up this network of connections throughout many years, and only if you do that, you come into positions that are maybe interesting in the sense of product development. And with this radical change, this allowed us to completely change this dynamic, which was also a good side effect.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just can I add one sentence to this? I would frame it like this: flight levels allows something like evolutionary change, but you can do a radical change if you like as well. But so it's more like, okay, find out what's helpful in your situation and what your culture can actually somehow. Yeah, I mean that's a thing, right? So it should be aligned to the culture. But you can do radical changes as well, or you can like start where you are and emerge from there. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. I also like you mentioning culture. So one thing we're looking deeply into it right now with my team, and we actually have Simon from my team, Simon Berg. We are looking into something called integral theory and spiral dynamics. And this talks a lot about culture and value systems, value memes. And we often make the experience that we try to make a change that requires a different way of thinking, and you first have to change this the values and ways of thinking within an organization before they become ready to adopt these new ideas.
Yeah.
Very cool topic as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So bearing in mind, of course, that both safe and flight levels, training programs and so on, they take some days to get through in order to be able to understand the nuance and the details. There's obviously some practice that's required, so on. I'm curious if you were trying to explain what is safe through the flight levels lenses that you were talking about. What would be like the sort of 30-second or the 1 minute kind of, what is it? How do you understand it?
Cool one.
Oh, that's difficult one. So first, I can't do it, to be honest. I can't do it in 30 minutes. So, but at the core of Scaled Agile framework is something which is called an Agile release train, which is an organization consisting of between 50 and 130 people organized into teams who work together on a product, or how they call it, on a solution. And by saying that, because you have multiple teams working together on a product, I think most of the people knowing flight level start thinking of a flight level 2 system. And for me, that's what it is. A very special one at that, because one of the things that SAFE introduced was this notion of the big room planning, where those 150 people come together for 10 days, and maybe now you will start laughing a bit, but they plan the next 10 weeks. So they build a plan for the next 10 weeks, and then they implement this plan in 2 weeks iterations.
Okay.
And then
I think you did really well for an answer that you said was super difficult. I feel like there's something that I've understood. I'll be honest, from my side, I don't know a hell of a lot about SAFE. I've encountered some bits and pieces. I have a few friends who are big into it, and I've learned a lot from them, but it's definitely not something that I've understood in detail. So I appreciate the explanation. I actually want to jump across to one of the questions from the chat that kind of connects to this. Neil Cook is asking, he says, provocative question, and then says, do the flight levels or the SAFE levels of portfolio, program, and team, do they map to the 3 flight levels? Can you talk a little bit about this? What's your take?
I like that question, because I have met many people who think that flight levels is a 3-level hierarchy, and I think it's not. For me, flight level is like an abstract class in programming, and you can have nested levels of flight level 2 systems, and this is actually what SAFE has. So I mentioned the Agile release train. This is the first flight level 2 system where you coordinate or can be understood as a flight level 2 system where you coordinate several teams. There is also the notion of a solution train, and the solution train is defined as an organization or a working system that coordinates various or several agile release trains. And for me, this too is a flight level 2 system. And then you also have the portfolio level within SAFe for large complex organizations. And this again is somehow a flight level 2 system where you coordinate the various value streams or solution trains that you have within a company.
Yeah.
And this then is connected to a strategy, which for me is a flight level 3 system. So again, you have many teams, of course. Then you have a nested or can have a nested system of flight level 2. And this is connected to a company strategy, which is in my simple view a flight level 3.
Yeah, I think you just came up with a very good point, this nested flight level 2 systems. I guess many people, they don't know this, they don't see this. What I see quite often in reality, that people somehow come up with a flight level 2, and then they're like, but we need to coordinate this product. So that's a flight level 2.5. And then, oh, but this is different product groups. We need to coordinate them. So this is a 2 and, oh, damn it, now it's getting tricky. And I've also seen that people start adding flight levels, like that's flight level 4, flight level 5, flight level 6. I'm like, okay, if we go up that high in numbers, there's something else wrong. That's one thing. But the other thing is, whenever we are talking about the coordination problem, as you just said, it's flight level 2. Yeah, good point.
I want to change it up a little bit. There's actually 2 questions. We've got Stephanie and Pavel are asking about how did you decide to use, or why did you decide to use SAFe and flight levels, and how are you using them together? So what's behind the decisions to use it, and how do they fit together?
So the decision for using SAFe as a reference model was taken before I joined Swisscom, and actually Simon, again, who is in the chat, worked at the part of Swisscom where we developed Swisscom TV, and they decided to give Scaled Agile Framework a try. This was a couple of years ago, and they were very successful with that product. And I think that gave us a good feeling to use that for other parts of the organization as well. Now, what I do is, again, for example, let me give you an example of how I use the things I learned from Klaus and Ziggy about flight levels in my everyday work. So, as I said, we have nested levels of flight level 2 systems. We have the notion of the solution train, which has various agile release trains. And for the last 3 years, I was coaching or working together with such a solution train. And we had the problem that, or after digging into the flow metrics and so on, I noticed that work kept piling up at the solution train level. So if you looked at the cumulative flow diagram, you saw that work in progress was continually increasing. And this was because the 2 working systems, were not properly connected. So we had a team planning at this level, and the teams planning at the agile release train levels, and they hadn't properly implemented the what you call them, Klaus, the agile interactions. So the feedback loop didn't work properly.
Yeah.
And knowing about flight levels and how you have to, or how you can connect working systems helped me see this problem, and also helped me come up with proposals on how to address these issues.
Yeah. I think this is a very interesting one, because for me, this is part of what I see people often misunderstand about flight levels. There's actually a couple of questions in the chat about this, and a few people have brought this up at different points. But this idea of feedback loops, whether they move in a single direction. So Neil's actually pointing out a follow-up to his first question is, in SAFe, very often people interpret it as it goes epic, feature, and story, and that there's not so much actually going in the opposite direction. And I wonder kind of how much of this is people's sort of understanding versus what is actually the intent, because I kind of see the same thing happening with flight levels, is that folks see, you know, level 3, 2, and 1, and they go, well, strategy becomes coordination, becomes teamwork. And in reality, it's somehow that the feedback loop has to go the other way, because, you know, it's not just that we decide where to go and then we miraculously end up there. We want to also make sure, are we going the right way? And, you know, what does that mean? Like, how does that affect our strategy and direction? So I'm curious, how do you see this working in practice, and what is your thoughts on this?
Yeah, very, very cool topic. So what we keep saying is that we want to the agile release trains or solution trains, we generically call them value streams. We want them to be as autonomous as possible, and we try to align them through strategy. And we say that in a healthy system, roughly 60 to 80% of the work comes from the local context, and only 20 to 40% of work comes from the upper level. So because in a system where the top management has to define all the work that is getting done in the teams, it's probably
hopefully not
the best. Hopefully not. and more so in a large company like Swisscom is. So the people working in the teams, they know what the problems are in their context. They know how they can solve those problems. And they should be able to prioritize this work with the knowledge they have. And only for coordination and for strategic, we need to coordinate and break down the work. So this is really about one of the scaled agile principles is called decentralized decision making. And I think autonomy of value streams of teams is at the core of this principle. Decisions should be taken where the knowledge is, and not all the knowledge is at the center of the organization.
And that's what we try to make explicit in flight levels. So there's the concept of flight routes. It actually somehow tries to show how is work flying through your organization and where are we taking which decisions. And if you have flight routes, which are only like they start on flight level 3 and they go down to flight level 1 and there's nothing else going on, this tells quite a lot about the culture in this organization. This tells quite a lot of how people think this organization shall work. If we see flight routes like this, we start on the team level or on a flight level 2, and we see direct routes, just the flight level 2 is handling the work, and we don't include the flight level 3. That's a good sign. The other thing is, it's also a good sign if work goes up. So it's like we start somewhere, maybe in the team or on the flight level 2, but then we go up, and not only one flight level 2 brings the work to the flight level 3, but multiple flight level 2 bring the work to the flight level 3. This means, so flight level 2 systems are usually product, services, stuff that makes impact on the market most of the time. And now they are somehow they are competing there. And now we try to go out from the local optimization. Like we don't want to locally optimize one product. We want to optimize for the entire organization. So it's a good sign, actually, if all the flight level 2 systems bring up their stuff to the flight level 3, they are competing, and then we decide, okay, what's the stuff that we're going to ship to the market in the next 10 weeks or whatever the cadence or frequency is. And I think I kind of like this in flight levels because you just make it explicit. And if you take a look at the flight routes, you can tell so much about the culture of this organization. That's kind of cool. At least I like it.
and what I also like, and this is something I like about Scaled Agile framework and its comprehensiveness, which I usually there is someone who once said, comprehensiveness is the enemy of comprehensible. If you have too much information, it comes really difficult to understand. But one thing I like about Scaled Agile framework is that it also talks about other factors influencing autonomy of teams and value streams. For example, budgeting processes or architecture. Because if you want to decouple systems of work, you also have to take into consideration, hey, is this even possible to reduce dependencies based on our architecture, or can we foster autonomous decision-making with the budgeting process we have in place at our company? And within the Scaled Agile framework documentation, you can find lots of articles touching those topics as well.
Mm.
Cool. So we were actually having some discussion in our community earlier, and we post about these events that we actually offer beforehand. And so we have some discussion both with Matías and with the folks inside the community. I'll tell you in a few minutes how you can get involved if you're interested. But one of the topics that came up within this was that Silke, who's actually on the chat now and asking a question, her question on the chat now is saying, so it sounds like you're using flight levels and SAFe together. Could you talk a little bit about that? But I just want to give a little bit of context from the discussion that we had before. So basically, the deeper context behind the question was, how does flight levels influence a SAFe implementation? And what are kind of the benefits of combining both of these? Why are you doing this sort of hybrid approach? What is flight levels introducing that SAFe doesn't have, or vice versa? Let's talk a bit about that fairly large topic.
Okay, now I think I have to unveil a secret because I use flight levels a lot during my everyday work, and I don't tell anyone about it. It just helps me ask the right questions and propose hopefully good solutions. But I don't tell my peers or my coaches about flight levels because, as I said, a Scaled Agile framework is so comprehensive. If you want to start doing Scaled Agile framework, you have to learn so many new terms, like what is an Agile release train, what is a release train engineer, what is a solution manager, what is a solution train engineer, and there are a plethora of terms like this. And so I don't want to bother them with even new concepts from flight levels, but I use this knowledge, this thinking model, to look at the working system and ask hopefully good questions. Does that make sense to you, Klaus?
That's exactly, yeah, I would think so. But that's exactly what F. Biesdorf as a user just brought up. So I hear that understanding the flight levels might help me understand how a company works, even if they don't have implemented it. But I think that's somehow the point. But the point is you can also implement it. So you can use SAFe and flight levels, but you can use just flight levels. So it's not an either or. You can actually use both, or just one of them, or just SAFe. Yeah.
I think this is the great power, or I don't know any other thinking model or framework or method that can do this, that has this built into it. I can have a large company like Swisscom, where in one part of the organization we do Six Sigma. In another part of the organization, we do Scaled Agile framework. And even in another part of the framework, we do, I don't know what, less or whatever your favorite method or framework or whatever is. And we can combine this with flight levels, because it gives us a clear understanding of how this interdependencies in the organization work, and can give us proposals or solutions on how to connect them, how to align them, how to coordinate them. And I think really this is something that no other thinking model or framework or whatever, at least that I know of, can do.
But thanks for bringing this up, because I think that's one of the crucial points when we talk about business agility. So business agility is not about everyone is using sticky notes. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever if you are running an airline. It doesn't make any sense that your, I don't know, flight crew is doing Scrum. Or if you, it's like, wow, we need to fly to Zurich today. How can I do it? Well, shall we, I don't know, pull this lever? Oh no, let's try that one.
Yeah.
We know what's going on, right? It doesn't make any sense to use like Scrum or Kanban or something like this. And I think that's the beauty in flight levels. It basically, glues all the islands together and aligns it to strategy, hopefully. And I think that's the big point. I'm somehow, when I visit organizations, and now business agility is the topic that everybody needs to do, and now we see sticky notes explosions in controlling departments, and I'm like, maybe there are better tools than a whiteboard. I mean, it makes sense that they have something like, I don't know, stand-up meetings or something like this, but why the heck shall they write stuff on sticky notes or something like this? So why shall they do sprints? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the thing. We need to combine it if we want to. So an organization can't be totally agile. Each and every team has to be agile, and I can guarantee you that then we don't have business agility. That's the point I want to make. It took me quite long. I hope I could make it now.
Yeah, I like that. I like the example. My example is the Amazon Packet Delivery Center doing Scrum.
Perfect.
Not a good idea. Probably.
And nobody can say that Amazon. I mean, you can think of Amazon whatever you like, but nobody can say that they are not agile in the sense of business agility. This bookshop, right? This bookshop.
So I think when choosing the tools, context is king, and flight levels gives you an abstract model. For me, because I'm a big fan of this thinking models notion, gives you a tool for combining this and gluing, like you said, gluing things together. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. I think part of this is the human nature problem is that we tend to sort of find a hammer and then start looking for the nails as opposed to the other way around. We find the solution first. And one of the things that I find often a little bit challenging is that someone will go off to a conference or to some training program. They come back with 55 new tools in their box. And of course, the one thing that we usually do as a result of this, and I usually explain it to people on our training courses, is you've learned a lot of things. You probably don't need to use all of them. Or to put it another way, you certainly probably don't benefit from trying all of them at the same time. Because part of what we're actually trying to introduce in this kind of thinking is somehow about focus. And if you change 55 things, doesn't matter whether they're good ideas or not, you end up changing a lot of stuff and introducing a lot of whip into the system. And so you end up completely overloaded. How do you think in a safe world specifically, and in your context, how do you handle this kind of creating focus specifically on the important strategic items? Because I think part of the challenge inside this is that, SAFe has a lot of tools and a lot of ideas of how to solve things. And if human nature kind of connects with that, we try to implement everything. Even if it's a good idea, that's probably going to create some challenges. So what do you see happen in practice, and how do you go about handling this?
Wow, that's a difficult question, Cliff. And maybe again, that's why I like the notion of thinking model, because me personally, I think that thinking is the best thing you can do, and after thinking, you have to try things out. And so, not sure. Creating focus. I think understand your problem. And then choose the right tool. Don't try to implement everything, but instead just only pick the one thing that you think will help you improve your system or solve the problem you currently have. Was that your question, or?
I like that. I think part of the challenge inside this space is that, so Siggy was actually asking a question earlier about how do we create the self-organizing environment within the organization. You were talking about, part of the thing is that there's so many teams underneath and so on. And one of the things that I find interesting in this space is that if you create a space where everyone is self-organizing, one of the challenges is kind of getting people to somehow align in a direction. Here, Henrik Newberg has some really interesting ideas where he talks about autonomy and alignment as sort of different axes on a, you've probably seen that graph before. Yeah. There is some sort of a lot of nuance behind this, but this idea that if you want to sort of set everybody free, how do you get any kind of momentum in the same sensible sort of direction? And I like what you said is, for me, it's the same kind of thing. It's about creating focus. And so you can think through it, but you have to turn it into action. But what's important with that is that you don't think about 55 things and then try to do 55 things. You think about 55, you pick one, and then you do that one. Yeah. And maybe not exactly one, it could be two, but certainly, all 55 is probably not the best idea.
And so I saw Siggy talking about self-organization, and I think one very important thing, especially in large organizations, is once top management has figured out what the priorities should be and what the strategy is, the most crucial thing is to be able to tell this story to the people. And as in this image you mentioned, Cliff, from Henrik, it's important to tell them what the wanted outcome is, not what the solution is. So instead of telling them to build a bridge, you should tell them to cross the river or to find a way to cross the river. And then the teams need the space and the autonomy to decide in their very specific context what is the best solution to cross this bridge. Maybe it's building to cross the river. Maybe it's building a bridge, but possibly it's also building a ferry or maybe something else, or building a plane or whatever. And I think this is very important, being able to tell a story and then communicate it in a way that can be understood. And then the next thing is having people in the organization that are able to translate this story into a given context, because a strategy of a large organization is maybe 3 years, is maybe 5 years into the future. Okay, what does this mean for me? I'm doing tickets every day. What does this mean for me? Do we have people in between who can translate this into my specific context? I think this is crucial and very difficult at that.
And I think that's the missing link, what we tried to solve on the flight level 2, actually. Totally. Because we are on flight level 3, we are talking about years. I mean, your Swisscom is in infrastructure business. So a 1-year strategy, well, yeah, for sure, there is maybe one, but you're talking about decades, actually. So introducing 5G, I guess, it's not like, let's just do the project. So, I mean, it's like a huge initiative, which probably lasts for I don't know how long, right? So, and on the other way, people are working on stories and tasks. And Flight Level 2 is somehow the element which tries to bridge this gap.
So if you agree, I saw a question flying by. Someone asked, where did I learn from flight levels? I'd like to answer that. So my journey with, at that time, it was reading a book. My first contact with agility was a book called IT in Kanban. And it was written by one of the hosts, namely Klaus and Siggy, who is also in the chat. And a couple of years later, 3 years ago, I decided to join the enterprise Kanban coaching curriculum. And this is where I got all the theoretical know-how and practical hints, reading books and visiting those trainings, which I really recommend. Doing a bit of promotion here for Klaus and Siggy and Cliff.
Thanks for this. Yeah, back then we still thought that we were doing Kanban, but if you take a look at what Kanban is and what we were doing and what we are doing now, it's just 2 different planets. So yeah, it all started with Kanban, but we somehow tried to get out of this local optimization and is Scrum or Kanban better? I'm like, this does not compute to a meaningful question for me when we're talking about business agility. That's how flight level evolved. Thanks for the ads, for the recommendation.
Cool. I want to jump a little bit further back in the chat and just grab, there was a question from Mahesh Singh. He's asking, can you provide some advice on how to propose flight levels thinking to an organization implementing SAFe? And coupled with that is, can you propose this in a context of flight levels will improve your SAFe implementation, for example?
I'm not sure I can because of this secret I just uncovered. Because
maybe answer it in the context of how is it helping you?
Yeah.
As I said,
how is it helping you?
I use it by looking at the systems through my flight level lenses. and seeing things which I didn't see before knowing flight levels. And again, I'm not sure if you can give another answer, Cliff or Klaus, but in my special case within Swisscom, I decided not to talk about flight levels because this would confuse people. But I talk a lot about Klaus's ideas and Cliff's ideas. I did the shipbuilding simulation. I don't know how many times I did this, always without mentioning flight levels, just talking about the principles and the aha moments they had, and then translating it into the SAFe world.
Yeah, I mean, we see this, unfortunately, quite often that when there's a SAFe implementation, this is a decision which is like a top management decision, and usually they are not so happy to withdraw their decision and take another decision, and now we're doing flight levels. So what we see is that below the surface or below the carpet somehow, flight levels is growing there, but it's still the label SAFe on it. So I mean, it's cool because the thinking is somehow being spread, but it's also a little bit
and maybe I can add that. I mentioned that in the release train you have this notion of a PI planning, again a new word, sorry for that, but this 10 weeks iteration. And personally, I don't know if this is a good idea. I prefer small batches and small planning cycles. And maybe if you have reached a certain level of maturity with SAFe, you will want to move beyond SAFe, maybe. And then flight levels can be a good anchor for deciding, okay, how do we want? Where do we want to go from here? Or for example, if you,
go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Or one problem we are facing, not everything within Swisscom is product development. We have lots of other parts in IT operations, in marketing. What do we do there if we want to improve the working system? SAFe will not be the answer.
Yeah, I just brought in a comment from Christian, who is currently part of the Flight Levels coach. Hi, Christian. And the Flight Levels coach is something like the enterprise camping coach what you attended, Matías, but a couple of years back. So this is the upgraded version of it. And Christian Dürre just said, okay, so you are actually using SAFe and try to optimize this using your Flight Levels knowledge.
Totally, yes.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
That's the simple way to put it. Yeah, totally.
Cool.
I was just going to add into that. I think one of the things that I find interesting, regardless of what framework or tools people are using, is that, again, it's perhaps a little bit of a human nature thing, is that we sort of think about implementing some change as like we design over here, and then once we're done with designing, we implement it. And the challenge that I find with this is that at some point, it sort of, the way it tends to work out is that if we just know the answer, it becomes an implementation problem. And usually during the implementation, we stop having so many conversations about, is this the right thing, or what's it doing, and how's it helping? And it becomes much more of a get it done kind of a thing. And the challenge with this is that it tends to focus very much on executing and not so much on what's working. And part of this is that we don't spend so much time looking at what was already working in the organization. I imagine long before Swisscom was talking about flight levels or SAFE, the company was somehow quite successful. And it's quite likely that some of the things the company was doing before was helping it out. And I think that this is one of the things that people can sometimes find maybe a little bit uncomfortable about flight levels, is that because it doesn't come with so many, these are the meetings you have to have, this is the roles, that's where you have to build your boards and so on. You somehow have to, as Klaus likes to say, it's the sort of you're allowed to think, or you actually have to think approach. And I think this can be tricky because sometimes we don't want to do that. We just want to kind of copy and paste a recipe. And so balancing between these two, doing kind of just the right amount of each one is definitely an interesting one. So I'm curious what you think about what I've said here.
I totally agree. And I was remembered of the shipbuilding simulation. The thing is that we are too busy. As Klaus said, we need solutions. We don't have time to think about how to work. We need to get real problems solved and the product shipped. So just tell me how we can improve the system, and then let's move on. That's reality, and it requires also courage to take the time to reflect. Hey, what exactly are we doing? How are we doing it? How could we improve it? This takes a lot of courage in a big organization. Who will want to take the decision that we will try to implement something that no one has implemented before? I don't want to get fired as a CEO of Swisscom.
Exactly.
Do I?
Yeah. I mean, but that's a very mechanistic point of view of an organization, right? So the organization is a huge machine, and there's something broken, go there, fix it, do it. We don't have to think. There's a solution. Just install it. Setup.exe. EXE.
So before we start wrapping up, there's two things that I want to talk about quickly. So I just want to remind everybody, of course, if you've enjoyed this content, please hit the like button and hit a subscribe. Of course, this is Flight Club. And as you know, the #1 rule of Flight Club is to always talk about Flight Club. So tell your friends, tell your family, your colleagues, your co-workers, tell your family, of course. My family and my mom are actually watching this quite often. I get comments and feedback and tips from them about everything from what I said to what I was wearing to my hair was funny or something like this, which is, of course, a normal state for me. But yeah, if you like it, please join in. And of course, you know the meetup link. Jump on Meetup and sign up for next time. Next time on the 24th of November, actually, we will be talking with Esther Derby. And we will be exploring some of the content from her new book and talking about how her SEAM model actually maps to flight levels. She has a couple of really interesting things. So if you haven't yet read her book, you have about 2 weeks or so to read it. It's called 7 Rules for Positive Productive Change. And it's really, really, really quite fantastic. Cool. The other thing that I want to mention before we go into the last round of questions is I mentioned earlier that we'd been having some discussion on our community. And so I want to actually extend a little bit of an invitation for those of you, if you're interested in engaging in the community. One of the ways that you can do this is to follow the link that I've just pasted in the chat. There is a course called the Flight Levels or Introduction to Flight Levels. The way it works is basically the community is open to anybody who has accessed or attended one of our workshops. This is the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way to get access to that. And of course, you can extend your learning beyond it. It's entirely self-paced. There's a live check-in, and of course, includes the community access. And if you use the discount code, you get 20% off, and you can join in. The link is I will fix the link and paste it correctly in a second. Sorry about that.
Learn Flight Levels IO.
There we go. For some reason, it's pasting incorrectly. Cool. And then just to give you a little bit of context, basically in the community, we are having discussions with folks. Matías will be around. You can continue the discussion. We will also explore some of the questions we haven't had a chance to answer in the live stream. Unfortunately, we do have limited time. And so we will kick around some of those and we will have discussions, prepping the next rounds and next sessions and so on. Cool. So I think the new link is working. If you try the second link and it's not working for some reason, please drop me a message and I will find a way to fix it. But the easiest thing to do is to go to learn.flightlevels.io. I realize why that's not working. Sorry, I will fix it in a second. Cool. Matías, to close off, I wanted to ask a question to you, which was, given your experiences in learning, what is something that for you, you do differently now that, let's say, before you started learning about flight levels, you were not doing? What is a new learning discovery or tip you would like to share with folks?
I don't have a ready answer to that. I mean, for me, it changed almost everything, because it changed the way how I understand and see working systems. When I work through Swisscom and talk to people, then I start thinking about, okay, in which context is this person working now? How is this context linked to another working system, and how does this connect to the company strategy? So, and this is something, it changed not consciously, it just happened to happen, and it changed the way I perceive the world, and based on that, it changed the kind of questions I ask and the kind of things I propose to improve systems. So I couldn't point out one very specific thing I do differently. I just, or maybe it's, I think different. Maybe that's the answer. I don't know. Please help me.
That's kind of what I would expect for a thinking model, I guess.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Cliff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think it's quite similar for me, actually. A lot of my sort of the way that I look at problems and the way that I understand things, somehow, once you can sort of make sense of the whole system, somehow you have a model for understanding it, it becomes easier to sort of, oh, okay, maybe this is actually an interaction problem between the parts, or actually that whole step or that entire part is actually missing. And that's what we see quite commonly with level 2. So yeah, very, very cool. Awesome. I think the link is now working and everything is good.
Yep.
And so I think for the first time ever, we can actually maybe wrap up 3 minutes early. What do you think?
I think we should. I mean, there are so many questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to cover, so the chat is full of questions. But I think opening up a new question, we will probably run over time.
So maybe one wish from my side, Cliff, you mentioned the community, and I would love to engage with all the smart and intelligent people that are here. And I think the community is a good place to start. Also, please connect on Twitter. Let's just share our combined experience and learn from each other, because this is the one thing I like most. There is so much things I can learn from you, and I'd really like to be able to do that. So please, please get in touch.
I guess these are perfect words for the ending.
Awesome.
And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Matías. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you. Thanks to everybody on the live stream who's joined us. It's been really fantastic hanging out with you this evening and discussing all these wonderful topics. I hope to see you again next time. And yeah, until then, have a lot of fun and see you soon. Bye-bye from me.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Thanks, Matías. And thanks to everyone. Bye.
Bye.